tonight as the man of the century arrives at the airport outside of Moscow for his first public appearance. Questions that have arisen in the West about the validity of his flight have no place here today, as the crowds go wild over the first man to conquer space. Major Gagarin's initial function is a long red-carpeted walk to the platform, where Khrushchev greets him. Gagarin puts party first by thanking the communists for the opportunity. Khrushchev interrupts with a Russian bear hug and kiss as Yuri's pictures are waved. There have been grumblings in Russia about the cost of the space program, but that is forgotten today as tens of thousands pour into Red Square to get a glimpse of their hero. He stands atop Lenin's tomb and receives their accolades. There have been many unanswered questions about the flight, but there's no question of who is number one man in Russia today.
If you remember the TV series Lost, it doesn't matter what you think about it, remember the numbers. The last number was 108. Now, I went on forums and everybody discussed what all the numbers meant. I think everybody was coming from an assumption that it was a sequence of numbers. However, the number 108, I don't remember anybody ever mentioning the fact that Yuri Gagarin in 1961 circumnavigated the Earth in 108 minutes. And guess what? The distance between the Sun and the Earth is 108 times the Sun's diameter. And the distance between the Moon and the Earth is 108 times the Moon's diameter. And you can be sure there's more to it than that as well. But that's all the time that I have for now. All right, well, the date is Saturday, May 18th, 2024. And what we have on screen here are some Wikipedia pages I'm going to go through. I've just opened up this live stream here by hopefully playing to you some file footage from which I found on Wikipedia page to do with Yuri Gagarin and his meeting or celebration meeting with Nikita Khrushchev and the deification, as it was reported, the making a god of him, not just a hero, but making a god of this man. I think we might all be familiar with, us in the West, whatever remains of it, might be familiar with this sort of history or story of the space race from the perspective of the Western world, from the US, slightly less so than, maybe as a kind of an addendum, the European Space Agency, which is, I don't even know, maybe it's mostly French. They did some rocket launches out of French Guiana there recently enough, a couple of Christmases ago. But anyway, I don't want to get too much deviated on that other than to say that they tell a certain narrative. They call their rockets Ariane, after Ariadne, and also Aryan. So there is symbolism and there are keywords, special words tied up in that. And I'll say, Ariadne as in like the weaver of a kind of a fine thread. It could be a narrative, it could be a web, it could be a way out of the maze that she helps Theseus in the Minotaur's labyrinth. But of course, from the Western point of view and NASA, we might all be familiar with how the rockets are called things like Saturn, and what's another one of the rockets? Oh God, how have I forgotten it? It's just the slight pressure of being live here. But there is the Voyager, and there is the Apollo space program, and of course now it's Artemis for the ladies, otherwise known as Diana. So there's a lot of Greek symbolism to do with the sun god Apollo and going to the moon, which is the marriage of the sun and the moon. There's a lot of esoteric meaning, sort of hidden or only for those people in the rarefied, in the know type places. Or inner sanctum of people who are familiar with this kind of symbology and language. So that's from the Western point. Wouldn't it be then, if the world travels from east to west, wouldn't it be, although, I mean, it depends on your perspective, of course. I mean, if you're launching a rocket from the west, you're traveling towards the east. And as far as I can ascertain, I haven't been able to verify this, that when the Russians do it as well, even though they're from the east, from the perspective of Europe and America, that they still travel east. And this language is particularly, well, we would recognize it. I think a lot of us would recognize it as being that special kind of particular esoteric language that, and I don't want to say this too early because I'm only in the first few minutes of this, but I'm going to say it would be a brotherhood type of language, a brotherhood of man. I think we can say that this early on in the stream. Because there would have been, I think, didn't the Mamas and the Papas have a song? I won't get distracted on it now, but there was some kind of 60s group anyway that had, or maybe it was a band called the Brotherhood of Man, but there was very like the Grateful Dead and the Mamas and the Papas and other bands like that, who were singing around the time of the space age and the space race in the 1960s and 70s to some extent too. But the Russians, and I'm going to show, they were heading east as well. What exact point were they fixed on? I think I'm going to be able to show that. And in the language of the Brotherhood Brothers, or the Brotherhood organizations, and the sort of, well, no, I don't want to get into it too much, but going back in through time, we can say that they always had an eye on the East. If we look at Russia then, or as it was known then, the United Soviet Socialist Republics, or the CCCP, whatever exactly, I can't say it in Russian, that was in their time, they were looking east as well. But wouldn't it do us well to look at them and what they were calling their stuff? Because they weren't calling their stuff Apollo, and they weren't calling it Voyager, and they weren't talking about Saturn in their rockets. They had different names. And on screen, hopefully, you can see that one of their spacecraft, maybe you could say the equivalent of, yeah, I guess we can say this is the equivalent of the Challenger shuttle. And of course there was other names for the shuttles. There was Discovery, and there was Endeavour, and there was a lot of these other if you look in the back of dollar notes, Annus Coeptum, isn't it? Or Annus Coeptis. Something like, bring to us favour in our great endeavour. You can translate it with a little bit of poetic license there, but again, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. I won't get bogged down in that just now, because I kind of want to make this not be several hours long, hopefully just not too much longer than an hour. But if we start at Vostok here, which was the name of their spacecraft, the spacecraft in which Yuri Gagarin travelled, not to the moon, but he circumnavigated the Earth, and he did that in the spacecraft called Vostok. I'll scroll the page down just a little bit so you can get a better picture of the spacecraft there, but maybe I'll go and give you a bigger picture now in a minute. I tell you what, while I'm talking, I'll give you a bigger picture. I will put on a little bit of a slideshow here. Maybe there's going to be some nicer pictures at a higher resolution that while I talk. Those can be going on screen, you know. Um, so Vostok, Vostok, in Russian, uh, means east, or can be translated as east. Not everything is exactly equals one for one, if you know what I mean. But as best as we can sort of translate it into something meaningful for us, Vostok means east. And I think that's interesting because once you learn one word, it can make you think, you know, okay, what else? That sounds familiar. And for me, obviously, what sounds familiar to me is Vladivostok. Vladivostok is the most easterly city in Russia, right on the coast there, most easterly city that matters, you know, or big city. It's the famous port town on the east of Russia. It's in Asia. It's so, I mean, you know, their whole empire went from Moscow or St. Petersburg or Leningrad over to Vladivostok. A great, great empire. Once the mortal enemy of the West, certainly of the United States of America, and I guess Britain or the United Kingdom, and Europe, I suppose, but particularly the two foes were the USA, the great superpowers of the world that emerged out of World War, after World War. Well, we won't get into the war. But they might have thought that Russia was, I certainly did anyway, like was more backwards than the USA, that copied the USA. Or that whatever they built was sort of like a Me Too version, but wasn't as good. Like, say, the Americans would have, you know, Ford and Chrysler and General Motors, and everything there was just so great, powerful V8s. Whereas on the Russian side, it was just, oh, well, we'll have some kind of stupid Lada. Or I know they did have, I can't remember the name of it now. I know they did have some slightly better models, like for the inner party of the Soviet Socialist Republics in the Kremlin, but everything seemed to be, you know, less well done, nailed together. But anyhow, their empire stretched, you know, the Trans-Siberian Railway and that kind of thing, all the way across to Vladivostok, as I say. And Vladivostok, so what does it mean? Something of the east, clearly. Well, what I looked up Vlad earlier. Maybe I'll get that on screen now, did I? Did I look up Vlad? Well, look, maybe I don't have it on screen, but you can take my word for it. Vlad means leader. So Vladivostok means leader of the East. And it is the architecture of the city is very European. And it has been a tourist attraction for the sort of Asiatic races, the ones we think of as being Asiatic. People like Japanese and the Koreans and the Chinese, if we don't want to put them all into one race, like the Manchurians, and I won't get into it. But anyway, you know, wherever they might be, from Burma, Laos, Cambodia, whenever and wherever they could, if they wanted to be able to go to Europe but not travel so far, they would go to Vladivostok and see European architecture. The Paris of the East is, I think, what it might have been called at one point as well. So it was a thrill for these Asian people to sort of see a European city in Asia, Vladivostok. And Vladimir means great leader, or exalted or brilliant leader. And that makes me think of words like mirage, like that's something that is so sort of great that it's almost like an apparition. And I'm sure there's plenty of other words now. I was thinking about them earlier, and unfortunately they leave my head now, but there's other Mir words, you know, and Mir is another Soviet name, isn't it? For one of their, is it one of their planes? God, why do these things leave me now? I'll look it up. Mir. Well, looking up here now, and I hate to make an alarm myself now, but Mir, it says it means peace or world, but maybe these things can be translated slightly different way. Maybe a leader or a great leader brings peace, you know, that kind of way. He brings peace by force. But of course, Mir was a space station. So you can see they've got a theme going on anyway. I'll just see if I can. Sorry for the unprofessionalness of this here. Now I'll just get the slideshow out of the way there, and you can see Mir, the space station. And look, I know what you're thinking. I mean, is that really somebody taking a photograph in space, or is it just a computer rendition? Probably a computer rendition, unless they state otherwise. And even then, of course, I'm highly skeptical of all this. I'll say this once, although it should go without saying. I am highly skeptical of not only what the Russians might tell us, but what our own people tell us. In fact, I'm more skeptical about what our own people tell us. By that I mean the Europeans from any country, the Americans of whatever flavour from the USA, and the Canadians and everybody else in the Western world. Everybody lies. But it's always important, I think, and instructive and helpful to examine their story within its own narrative, look for any contradictions or glaring omissions or things that just don't seem to add up, or corroborations with other things we know. It's just useful to examine it. But anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in Mir anyway, because it's not what I sort of prepared and read up on. So I'll read this out here now. Vostok, Russian, and it looks like a B, but again, and I'm really very fascinated with the transliteration. B in Russian, that letter is pronounced V. It looks like B to our mind. So, it's like a cipher. You just need to sort of swap certain letters for other letters. It's a very curious thing. And all of a sudden then things start coming into picture. The picture starts tuning in then. But it also reminds me that I can't just sort of say to myself, well, just because something is familiar to my eyes, that's the right way. And I'm just sort of fixing something so that it makes sense to my mind. It makes me more appreciative then of people who are polyglots. And I did used to know some Russians and work with some Russians, and I just conversed with them in English, and I took it for granted that they talked to me in English. I didn't appreciate that the conversation was always going to have this extra degree of difficulty for them. They're always having to translate to some extent in their mind, and to read English, to translate or transliterate the letters, do a code page change. So there's a lot going on for them, and I really have to I find I'm always kind of almost in awe of people who do that. But also to be a polyglot, I appreciate all these famous men throughout the world, even the Pope, who is not really a Pope. If they indeed can speak many languages, it's sort of like a baseline prerequisite for being on the world stage. And I appreciate people who have a different alphabet, like in this case, I guess it's called the Cyrillic alphabet. Maybe I'm even pronouncing it wrong. Maybe it's supposed to be Cyrillic. But it seems to me, again, I'm no student of languages, but it seems to me that, like the Russian symbol of the bird looking east and looking west, that it came out of the Byzantine Empire. We see that same bird symbol looking east, looking west. So like there was Rome, like there was Constantinople or Byzantium. We have the two halves, the two wings of the bird, like we now know in our current politics. Back then, the more things changed, the more they stay the same, thus as it ever was. They had the Roman Empire taking care of sort of what we now know as Central Europe and Western Europe. And then we had the other wing, the bird Constantinople, taking care of, what do they call it? The Near East, or Asia Minor, and Russia. But I think, I guess it must have been when, what was her name? Sophia, Queen Sophia. Like in a game of chess, she castled with, I guess it was either Moscow or St. Petersburg. I think it was St. Petersburg she must have fled to. Would that make more sense? And there's a place up there called, oh God, what was it called? Archangel. There's a place above St. Petersburg called Archangel, as far as I remember. So like a game of chess, when he was being threatened by, I suppose, the Turkish or the Mongols, or maybe there was others, maybe there was some kind of incursion from North Africa, even whether it be Carthaginians or whatever you would call them these days, Egyptians or whatever, people from North Africa as well as the Asia Minor area, Turks and whatever. She must have said, right, it's getting too dangerous here, and castled like you would in a game of chess with the rook or the castle up in St. Petersburg. Anyway, I'm getting off the track here, but just to me, that's how I'm intuiting how Russia must have absorbed what might have been left of the Byzantium or Byzantine Empire, and then kept a lot of the same symbols, like this bird looking east and looking west. But look, I suppose it's important to say looking east and looking west, because it's all about, and again, I don't care what shape of the earth it is for now, for the purposes of this discussion. It's just, if we take the earth to be a rotating mass, let's just say that it is for the sake of discussion, well then there's an east and a west rotational axis going on, and we can say axis in the sense of, a line running through a sphere, and also political sphere, So, and this symbolism and these words are tied up, as I say, in the brotherhood of man and these brotherhood groups. So Vostok, translated as East, was a class of single-pilot crewed spacecraft built by the Soviet Union. The first human spaceflight was accomplished with Vostok 1 on April 12th, 1961. Now, maybe there's some importance about that date that we can look into in numerology. It's not leaping out at me, but maybe it is obvious to others. But I don't know that, so I'm just going to move on. Yuri Gagarin. I'll play it, I suppose. Yeah, I guess I'll play it again in a moment. I did a YouTube short a while ago, and I'm gonna maybe play it again. It's just, of course, less than a minute long, but I guess I'll skip over the running order that I had intended, and I'll say maybe the reason why I introduced the idea of the Cyrillic or Kyrillic alphabet is that Yuri, when we translate it, they don't spell it Y-U-R-I. We do that, and that because that's our closest approximation to how they spell it. They spell it with a letter that you're just not going to recognize at all. Maybe I can get up here a page of the Russian alphabet here. They spell it with a letter that is just unusual to our eyes. See if I can find it here. Sorry for the dead air. Here's the letter. It looks sort of like I-O. Can I get a highlight of it here? Or maybe, like, maybe in a way it kind of almost looks like a space capsule, or half a H attached to an O, or an I with a dash and then an O, or a 1 and a 0. But I mean, if you think laterally, it might look like a spacecraft, or even a bit like the rocket itself. And I think it's important to sort of say that, like a spacecraft on its side, like, traveling east. I don't think that's too much of a stretch. But it's pronounced like YU, or that's how we would transliterate it, or JU, because again, you can transliterate Y and J. They're pretty much interchangeable. Y, I, and J are pretty much interchangeable. You have the name Jan or Jan or Yan or Yan. It's all the same, and just pronounce it. You could think of it as like a different accent. I won't get bogged down anyway, but that's the first letter of his name in Russian. Okay, so this is why we don't have to spell it with a beginning with a Y. It could just begin with a U for Yuri. And you might have heard of the sort of magician or mentalist or illusionist, but he would call himself not an illusionist. I think he claimed for a long time that he really was bending spoons, Yuri Geller. And he was a Hebrew or Israeli guy, rather, I should say. But his name was Hebrew. So the Hebrew version of it is Uri. And the way we spell the Russian version is Yuri with a Y. But it's the same name. And that's why I wanted to show you the sort of transliteration. And again, I would say that there's a line or a seam or a migration route, a large wide band, a road that travels from, I guess we're going to have to say more southerly, like coming out of this Levant area, traveling up through Mesopotamia, traveling up into Russia that way, along the Black Sea and so on. So they would have absorbed a lot of the culture there. And of course, I mean, nobody would be in any doubt at all that whether there are disputed territories currently going on between former Soviet satellite countries, or even what that means anymore, and Russia, or what remains of the Russian Empire, no matter what you call it now, they would have, of course, had to have absorbed the people in what would have been Khazaria, the Ukraine, and Romania, and a lot of other places where people with a sort of this kind of Hebrew culture or heritage would have resided as well. So again, this is what Russia would have absorbed and made part of its empire. So I'm reading out of this here. It's generated by Brave AI, but it draws on Name Berry, Abraham Publications, Bible Study Tools, and 8 more. So it says the name Yuri or Yuri is of Hebrew origin and means my flame, my light. Now again, it's like this is a very meaningful word, the light of the world, being put inside a capsule. And you have to, I'm not going to tell you have to do anything, but if you think about these things in poetic terms, I mean, it's very symbolically meaningful to put somebody whose name is the light and put it inside a capsule and send that capsule in an easterly direction towards the sun and circumnavigate the earth with this light in its protective womb almost, or like a lantern inside glass that you carry along on your journey. And this is a journey. And I mean, maybe I should explain at this point the thumbnail that I made for this, and what do I want to do as well here? Let me see if I can just get it up here. Let me see if I can put it up there. Constant companion. So maybe I won't explain where that comes from just yet. We'll get there. But I don't know if the resolution is good enough on this or it'll be on your phone or monitor. But there you can see in that stamp, it's a commemorative stamp from, I think it might have been 2010 or 2012. And it's got his name written underneath him there. That's Yuri Gagarin, a cosmonaut. And it's got the symbol of, it's like their version of the bird. It's the symbol of Ukraine. And you can see it written along the sides there. It's YK, and then what looks like a P to R eyes, but that's R, as in row, as in the Greek alphabet. So that's Ukraine, and the H is like an N to our language. So it's Ukrainia. But that type of N, as far as I understand it, is like an N in Spanish or Portuguese with a tilde over it to mean that you kind of go nya a bit with it. As far as I understand, it's Ukrainia. So it's Ukraine or Ukrainia or the Ukraine. And I guess I'll tell you now, there's no point in teasing this any longer. Ukraine means border or borderland. And now that gives new meaning to what a buffer state is between two great continents or two great powers. They don't just have a single border, they have a territory that acts as a border. America would create these things called demilitarized zones. There still is one between North and South Korea. And I'm sure there are places like that, other places like that around the world. And even like whatever border might be there nominally between the United States and Mexico, there is a no man's land. It's not just a single fence. There'd be something on either side of that. And then Mexico would have a border then. But there's a sort of a no man's land between, or a demilitarized zone. between North and South Korea and as other places. That idea. But so the Ukraine or Ukrainia, whether you want to call it the borderland or the borderlands or borderlands, that's what Ukraine literally means in Russian. And it's pretty clear to me, even though this might not be politically, it's not maybe something they want politically to acknowledge, politically convenient for people to sort of say. But without having to learn either language, I think it is clear that Ukrainian is like a dialect of Russian. Certainly very much part of the family tree of this kind of language. So the name of the country, if we translate it, it describes what its function was. It was a place where lots of peasant farmers, and we won't get into the or more, but that's a place where peasant farmers were part of the Russian Empire, but also, bordering into Europe. It acted as a border between the European powers and Russia. Anyway, I thought that was very interesting to see the Ukraine. Only a little bit more than 10 years ago, 15 at most, were celebrating not only a great Russian hero, but a Russian hero whom they deified. They made a god out of him. So certainly it's not a stretch to say he was at some point in the 60s, the patron saint of Russia, the most celebrated man in Russia. And the Ukraine celebrated him enough to put him on a commemorative stamp. And now they're at war. So certainly, these are brother nations. Minimum. Or Russia is like a big brother, or even a father or an uncle. And Ukraine is the sort of smaller ally, should have been, But something has turned them against each other. It's very strange, isn't it? So a constant companion, Yuri, the light, the flame, my light. That's what Yuri means in Hebrew. Now, I think I looked it up in Russian and it means something else in Russian. I guess I'll look it up here, but I'll read this out into the record anyway. It is a short and strong name that has a lot of crossover potential. In the Old Testament, there are 2 Yuris mentioned. The father of Bezalel, an artisan who created the meeting tent and Ark of the Covenant for Moses. Okay, so I'll spell it out here. That means that there is a light, the presence of God inside the Ark, which they carry around, which contains the tabernacle, which Christians believe the tabernacle contains like the host, the Eucharist, the living body of Christ. And Jews believe contains literally God's presence among them, who dwells among them while he dwells on earth with them. And that's why they carry him around. The power of God with them. So that's the light of the earth. So, you can see the symbology here with putting my flame, my light, the eternal flame, inside a casket that goes around the earth. So he was the father of Bezalel. Abraxas there says fornix. I don't even know what that word means. It doesn't. It doesn't even look familiar to me. Is what I mean to say. I don't know what it means. I could look it up, but you can tell me if you like. The name. Oh, so I skipped a bit there. And the father of Geber, or Geber, one of the 12 officials who provided nourishment for Solomon. The name Yuri comes from the Hebrew verb or, which means to shine. In the Bible, Yuri is also the name of a gatekeeper who married and divorced his foreign wife during the purge of Ezra. In addition to its biblical significance, Yuri is also the name of several notable individuals, including Uri Geller, a psychic, it has that in quotation marks, and author, and Yuri Sivan, or Sivan maybe, an Israeli physicist and professor who is the president of the Technion, the Israel Institute of Technology. In Hebrew, the language, the word Yuri means my light. It's repeating itself now. Often used as a nickname for Uriah. So I've heard of Uriah Heep. So I wouldn't have made the connection there, actually, funny enough, even though sometimes in retrospect these things always seem to be glaringly obvious. So Uriah, which means Yahweh is my light. So that connects Yahweh to light. Amazing. Okay. Is there anything more now? I think there probably is out of Vostok here. The Vostok program made 6 crewed spaceflights from 1961 through 1963. This was followed in 1964 and 65 by 2 flights of Vostok spacecraft modified for up to 3 pilots, identified as Vashkhod. By the late 1960s, these were replaced with the Soyuz, which are still used as of 2023. Abraxa says the light is kept in the fornix. I see. So maybe the fornix is inside the Ark of the Covenant, inside the tabernacle. I'll look up fornix here now, just to see if there's a definition. Fornix neuroanatomy. Ooh, interesting that it's part of the brain as well, because I know people, of course, would say whatever's inside the brain, it's the temple as well, or sort of inside the skull is the temple. And there's the third eye and all that sort of thing there as well. I wonder what the other definition of it is. I tell you what, I'm going to look up etymology of it. Of fornix. Anatomical art or fold. Forni in Italian or Latin means to fold. All right. As in to fornicate. It means to like bend over each other sort of thing. So the arc is the fornix. Like a parabola. The shape that a spacecraft makes when it's flying. Gotcha. Abraxa says, do you see the ram? So I guess that's as in the astrological sign. Okay. And modus operandi says vault or arch. Okay, very good, very good. And an arch, of course, an arc brings in the keystone. Abraxa says Bill Donahue. Were you watching what I was watching earlier today? Bill Donahue had a lot of great things on. I was thinking of doing this as a lead-in to something else to see how this connects to something else. Everything always connects to something else, to lots of things you can't mention. Bill Donahue, had a lot of good. I kind of underestimated him at the time. Thought he was almost like another Jerry Springer. But no, he was bringing serious topics that we can't discuss now to mainstream daytime TV. I wonder why you mentioned Bill Donahue. Fornix is shaped like a ram's head. My God. Well, no wonder then they have the Pentagon in the middle of a ram's head. And no wonder we associate the ram's head with sort of sorcery on Earth. Okay. I get back on, and as Braxa said, the pineal inside the fornix, right? So it does translate into the etymology there. And as I say, I remember that forni means to fold, which is where we get porn from. I'll look up just to finish this off. I said I was going to do it, so I'll look it up. Etymology of fornix. In topical geometry, a part of, and this is just what is being given by the word Nick at the Center Dictionary. In topical geometry, a part of a surface which, in conjunction with another similar part which inseparably accompanies it, inseparable as well, constant companion, increases the cyclosis of the surface by 2. In anatomy, a median symmetrical arched formation in the brain beneath the corpus callosum and septum lucidum. Well, if you're lucid, you're thinking straight. You're thinking brightly with it. And lucidity means you've got the bright light shining in your mind. To me, it is just amazing how all these words help to paint a more complete picture of what's going on, you know? So Abraxas says pineal inside fornix. Moda says exactly Abraxas. Abraxas says I watched many of Bill's lectures. Bill Donahue, are we talking about the same guy? Did he do lectures as well as the daytime sort of talk show stuff? I think we must be talking about different guys. Moda says cerebral cover. Abrax says one thing is for sure, wherever we are, this place is a trip. Yeah. And look, again, I mean, there's lots of things I think of before I come online. And then, to do a live stream, I mean. And then I gain something in that I feel the pressure to start talking, and I do, and things kind of flow, and that's all right. And I've already made the decision that I'm happier that things are going to be imperfect, but I'd rather do something than nothing. Later on, I often regret that I didn't express things in a better way, or more coherently, or in the right order, or whatever. Or oftentimes I still accidentally say one word that's close to another word, but isn't the word I meant. These kind of things. And then, of course, I forget my train of thought. But there was several things that I kind of wanted to say. And one of the things, what you reminded me there about, saying this place is a trip, is that I am prepared to accept, like, say, for example, God, I want to introduce this too. So I'm sure people in America, same as people in UK or other English-speaking countries like Ireland, and to some extent South Africa, even though that's bilingual, and Australia, New Zealand, and other places that have English as a first language. If we have English class in school, we might roll our eyes and say, I already speak the language, why do I need to do this? I'm so embarrassed. I don't think I ever really said that kind of thing, but I did think that there wasn't much to learn. I just read a few books, whatever. Read a couple of Shakespeare things, read a few poems, learn them off by heart, learn a few lines off, and you're done. Or what use is it ever going to be? But in my older age, I realise that I don't really want to quote him, but do you know the guy? And I keep going tangent off tangent. The guy, why is his name gone out of my head now? Quantum of Conscience. He always says, like, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? And he's, I think, quoting Rush Hour. But I realised that for so long I thought I spoke English. And I wasn't even understanding the words that came out of my mouth. And the way we learn our own language is just, we sort of get a sense of what words seem to mean by the way other people use them. And those other people, whether they be even our parents, that they don't really understand the language they're using either, even though my parents were pretty good at English, It was their first language as well, That's the embarrassing thing. I can't even say, like, say, if I was German or French or Italian or whatever, that, English isn't my first language, so that's why I struggle to find the right word. No, English is my first language. And I still struggle to find the right words in English, But what I wanted to say was, in learning a few words in some other languages, it has helped me to learn back my own first language and then look up the etymology of words and kind of go, oh my God, I only had a baby understanding what these words mean. And now I'm unlocking, and have been for a few years now. I'm not trying to boast. It's sort of embarrassing. When I realize, just by splitting a word sometimes, what it really means. And I kind of go, oh my God, I didn't even understand the words that are coming out of my own mouth. But looking at language, pulling words apart, understanding the etymology is part of the process of understanding that I accept that, just like in English class, we're always asked to think about, what did we think the poet meant when he said this? Or why did the poet choose this word when he could have chosen any of a number of synonyms? Like, that there might have been other words that would have scanned even better and gone with the meter. So the fact that he broke the meter of the poem to include this word must mean that is a more significant word, that he really wanted to go with that word, because there's a sort of a double meaning there that he wants to get across. And what I realise now about poetry and finely written prose, whether it be Shakespeare or any good book that chooses to write a narrative but have an aesthetic with it, not just because of the language that's used at the time when he wrote it, but he might be trying to write from a point of view of a time period when people wrote a certain way, or have a character talk and you can almost hear their accent as well. And they might use a word and they say it meaningfully. And you kind of go, oh, I think I understand something about what's going on here. There's a subtext. And so that's why the word choice really matters. And the people who rule our world obviously understand this, because the words they say to each other, they say with a nod and a wink constantly to each other. And that's why I chose constant companion. Or I could have chose fellow traveller. And we'll get on to that. We'll definitely get on to that. Okay. I think I kind of backed up there and got a few things out. So I wanted to sort of go on that little deviation to say, I agree with you that this world is a trip. And I have come from somebody who figured all the world's problems could be solved with better engineering and better understanding of our science. And now I realise nobody cares about any of that stuff, especially since 2020. But look, I'm going to say that for roughly 10 years, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, I began to realise that there is a plan, or there are plans that have been unfolding for far longer than even a single generation, far longer than three. Like they've been unfolding. Of course, if we think of Albert Pike and his 3 world wars, but I mean even on a grander scale than that, the story of this world has been unfolding for much longer. People are going to laugh at me putting it this way. Much longer, or much before even my grandfather was born, or great-grandfather, yours and mine and everybody else's. So this world is a construct of some way. And how I can say that, there's many sort of ways of sort of pointing to circumstantial evidence and saying, well, here's this. There's too many coincidences. There's too many little in-jokes with every little word that you pick up and examine to describe the world. But I guess what I noted before is it's not just that their plans unfold over long time periods, so that there's some spirit going through there. But let's just say for the moment that the devil exists as both a concept in like a metaphor, so that to satisfy atheists, it's just a metaphor or even a scapegoat that everybody creates to sort of say, it's only because of him that there's evil in the world. Human beings would be lovely if it wasn't for the devil tempting them, all right? But also as a physical entity, or maybe just not physical in the way we understand, but an actual entity with its own individual motivations, that transcends man's motivation, and certainly transcends a single lifetime of a single mortal. And he has a devilish sense of humour. And you can see that in all the languages. You can see it in all the puns, the little in-jokes, the play on words. So in that sense, like what I'm saying is I have come from somebody who just thought, look, we just need to engineer things better, need to further our knowledge of scientific knowledge, discover more things, make our knowledge go down to a more and more detail about understanding atoms and whatnot, and then we'll have solved all the problems of the earth. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. The biggest problem is human beings and their psychology. And religion dealt with that to some extent. I still do not like organised religion, but it acted as a stopgap for the worst of human beings' egos and excesses born out of their egos. So I was somebody who advocated for the removal of organised religion, but I see that human beings weren't ready for that, because they only pretended to be good and moral while they thought that religion had some kind of power over them. But consequently, when religion has been removed from the masses, they also think God is just some kind of namby-pamby superstition, because most people conflate God with religion. So I have come to understand that both things can be true. Man can understand more and use his own mind and fulfill his own potential, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. But it also doesn't mean that God isn't leaving us to our own devices to clean up our own mess. What I'm saying is there can be a spiritual realm, and is a spiritual realm. There is a metaphysical layer that I actually pity people for being so arrogant that they think that if they can't feel, taste, touch, smell, or hear something, that it doesn't exist, even though they use Wi-Fi all the time. And they think, well, it's perfectly normal. And they don't think about it because they don't think about anything. So anyway, I'll catch up with I noticed that Slow Boy is in the chat there, and so I was saying some of that with the mind to her there, because I do know that she is a religious sort of a person, but maybe not religious. Maybe it's not that she particularly is so into religion, more God or whatever is that aspect of it that I've described there. So anyway, Abraxas is not the same guy, different built on you, fair enough. I must look into that then, but it might be difficult for me to sort one from the other in a YouTube search. Slowboy says, "Hey there, John. I just saw the notification. Thanks, and I appreciate it. I only put a notification about 20 minutes in advance because, well, anyway, I won't get into the excuses of it now." Moda says, "I loved the study of roots of words, hence my affinity for Latin and Sanskrit." Really? Sanskrit? Well, I would love to hear what you've studied in Sanskrit, because I don't think I've studied anything in Sanskrit. Abraxa says, metonymy. What is metonymy? Meta? Coming from and out of names? Is that what it is? I guess I'll look it up here. I thought it was on screen there. Metonymy. Well, it doesn't really matter now. I won't change screen just for this, but it's a figure of speech in which a concept is referred to by the name of something closely associated with that thing or concept. So metonym comes from ancient Greek, a change of name from meta. And so I'll click into it, but meta, as far as I know, is up and out of something, or like the sum is greater than the whole of the parts, something along those lines. Meta, after, post, beyond. Figures of speech. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I keep getting myself distracted by things anyway. But I think I've covered Yuri, right? And there was a couple of things that I wanted to say about Yuri. And I just got distracted there. Slowby says, "I'm as religious as you can get." So I know you're but I don't think you're going to take too much offense if I use slightly the wrong word to describe it. I don't mean that as an insult. It's like, oh, you're into this, into that, like into New Age. People say that as an insult. I'm not equating New Age with Russian Orthodox, but I'm pretty sure you're a member of or into, in the sense of affiliated with or aligned with or a member of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. I think that's what you said. My stance would be, I don't like organized religion, but that doesn't mean, that has no bearing on existence of God or anything like that. So it doesn't make me an atheist just because I don't want to be a member of any organized religion. You know what I mean? And I think we can coexist along that. I think that's, I'm being honest there, and I have no problem with anyone as long as they're honest and state what their position is and what they believe in. But the way most people just don't want to do that. No, I won't get bogged down in that, but yeah, good. She says, I'm not offended. Good enough. So just going back to one or two previous comments there, you said the spiritual reality is more real than our real reality. Yes. Because our real reality, so-called real reality, is completely contrived by who I've come to realize are very skilled wizards, spellcrafters. She says, Slowby again says, if you don't know you're in a spiritual battle, that's step one for making sense of this world. Yeah, basically, well, I mean, you can't make sense of it unless you accept that there's a spiritual battle going on, exactly. And as I say, it would have been about 10 years ago, roughly, when I sort of said, yeah, there's more going on here than can be measured in your philosophy, Horatio, or whatever it is that I keep confusing it with some other play. Is it Hamlet? I keep thinking it's Macbeth always, but I think this is Hamlet, where he says to Horatio, there's more in heaven and earth than exists in your philosophy. I think that's it anyway, but I keep messing up that quote. So I realise there's more going on here than meets the eye. Yeah, good man, Modus, anyway. You did explain that metonymy thing there. Abraxa says, multiple ideas given inside one word or word sound. Exactly. And I think the most famous of that is logos. And it seems to me that every word does come from that. And in the same way, there's many ways of looking at it, of course, but for me, maybe I'll just sort of say this because it's, I think, a neat way of saying it. That, if God created the world, he created it out of that one word. But I find, like, as somebody who can, I'm all right at carpentry and making a few things. I'm not a metal worker as such. Actually, I shouldn't say such. I'm not a metal worker at all. But I'm I'm okay at making stuff out of lots of different things, and if I have the concept of it, I mean, whether it even be a physical thing or softer, if I want to, try and write something, it starts with a concept in the mind. And I'm not trying to, understand, I'm not trying to boast about anything. It's just to illustrate by example. If you're trying to construct something, you have an idea in your mind. Now, you may draw a diagram of it. You may try and draw a map or some kind of architectural scheme or blueprint, that sort of way. And you might do a blueprint for a program you want to write. Or even if you want to make a movie, you might do sort of storyboard, that kind of way. It starts with one concept and then it unpacks. And I think logos then is a word that can be unpacked in so many ways to create a whole language then, Slowboy says Bulgarian Orthodox Church, but yeah, in communion with Russia. Okay, so I'm laughing at that only because I'm thinking, right, this would be my attitude, right? If everyone starts joining the Russian Orthodox Church, everything, I'm sick of this now, like, because I never like anything that's so popular. So I need something that's a bit more rarefied. I think I'll join the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. Right? Oh no, I wouldn't move with those riffraff in the Russian Orthodox Church. Anyway, we'll move on before somebody might get offended, right? I'm only joking. I don't think we're getting offended. But look, I'll. The word is word into being, cymatics. Yeah, well, I do. I've seen a lot of people say, the world or the whirled, at the whirlwind as the world rotates or whirls around, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, sometimes like it seems as if people are stretching, but it's important to play with words and see how they are connected. And I mean, maybe a dictionary of etymology will say no, that these words aren't connected. They have separate sort of lines of evolution. But I just sort of see those as sort of maybe second cousins once removed or whatever, distant relatives, but then evolved from a point along those lines anyway of what I said earlier about the logos word. I see some laughs there from Slowboy, so that's good enough. I'm just going to take this off screen and share my screen again now and just go through Yuri here because there was a couple of things. Now, obviously, look, I do talk a lot, as you can tell. But there was a few things. I'm not going to read his whole article here, but I'm going to say, like, what could be a stretch is to sort of say, why did they photograph him for an official photograph? And he's looking, if we take it as he's looking north, then he's looking, what is he doing? He's looking west, is it? Look, I don't know. He could be looking south and looking east. I won't try and stretch things when it's not necessary, but it's just odd to me. I will say, like, he looks like a handsome man. He could be like who was the guy in America that was the fighter pilot? Was it Chuck Yeager? He all the women were after him. But of course, I mean, we can compare him to the astronauts, the Michael Collins and oh my God. Whatever's getting us now. I'll go on to Buzz Aldrin anyway, and my God. Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and the most famous guy. Oh, God. This is what happens when I go live. That just names people escape me. The third of the Three Musketeers. Weird, isn't it? Someone put me out of my misery and put it in the chat, hopefully. But it's just amazing. It'll come to me now just as soon as you write it. Abraxas is there. One who limits themselves to one definition. Choose to be the something Phoenician. It's just I can never read sometimes because there's a heart symbol there. I don't know how to get rid of it. And modus operandi says in the beginning was the word. Exactly, that's what I mean by logos. One word, and out of that came every other word. Damn it. Oh, look, I don't know why I can't think of his name. It's weird. But look, I'm moving on. Didn't matter, right? Just compare him to the astronauts. Anyway, he looks like a dashing fellow. And he died early, age 34. Not funny. Not 33, but 34. Okay, well, whatever. And born in March, 9th of March, 1934. I bet you somebody can do something with the numbers there. And 27th of March, 1968. I bet you the numbers add up to something there. It used to be the deaf Phoenician. Yeah, thanks. Neil Armstrong. Thanks, slow boy. Neil Armstrong. Just couldn't think of it. And I did say Buzz Aldrin, but it's just weird. Couldn't think of Neil Armstrong, even though he'd be the first guy I'd be able to think of. It's just weird. When you go live and there's a certain pressure on you, you forget. It's like being hypnotized. You know when they hypnotize you and you can't think of your own name anymore. And you're like, come on now. It's being under that pressure. It's weird. And I equate it to how some pressure valves work. Actually, how a lot of pressure valves work. I say a lot. Well, types of pressure valves, where there's a membrane that the pressure of the water pushes against and seals itself against the only aperture. That's kind of what happens with the pressure, where you forget certain things that it just won't come out. Anyway, yeah, this thing, it shouldn't matter, but I thought it was odd, right? Selection and training. Gagarin's selection for the Vostok program was overseen by the Central Flight Medical Commission led by Major General Konstantin Fyodorovich Borodin. I don't know why I'm choosing to read all this. Of the Soviet Army Medical Service, he underwent physical and psychological testing conducted at Central Aviation Scientific Research. I'll skip over a little bit just to say the appraisal that he had, I thought was interesting, right? Gagarin was in the chamber from 26th. So yeah, psychological tests were put on him, including placing the candidates in a anechoic chamber. Now, what does anechoic mean? It's a room designed to stop reflections or echoes of either sound or electromagnetic waves. So if he's going to be literally, really, if we believe this, in this capsule, floating high above the earth, I was nearly going to go into a David Bowie number there. Like Major Tom, you know, far above the earth. Oh boy, I'm not going to try and sing anything today. But this would be practice for it, wouldn't it? A room in which nothing will echo. It's a perfect non-echoing room, and you're just there. It's like what do they call them? Those chambers where you're isolated and there's no stimulus at all, so you're only alone with whatever thoughts you have with you in your head. And they say it can drive men crazy. They can't even take an hour of it, let alone days. So it says the combination means the person or detector exclusively hears direct sounds. But if there's nothing in there, they'll hear nothing except their own breathing. So the psychological evaluation was that he was placed in the chamber from 26th of July to the 5th of August. My God. So does July have 31 days, 30 days? That's September, April, June, and November. I think it does. And so does, well, it doesn't matter what August has. So we have 5 days of July and 5 days of August. So 10 days in his own in this chamber. Pretty amazing. So in August 1970, a Soviet Air Force doctor evaluated his personality as follows. Not just a doctor, but some kind of, you know, I think of these people in terms of the people who psych-evaled everybody during World War II and afterwards. And again, I did a video on this guy who investigated Kubark, or basically created the Kubark manual. Forget his name, but a Russian guy, and they took him over to the United States. Or maybe he claimed to have fled or whatever, you know. But it's not just a doctor, a psychological evaluator. So this was his assessment of Yuri Gagarin's personality. He was modest. He embarrasses when his humour gets a little too racy. He has a high degree of intellectual development, evident in Yuri. Fantastic memory, distinguishes himself from his colleagues by his sharp and far-ranging sense of attention to his surroundings, a well-developed imagination, quick reactions, persevering, prepares himself painstakingly for his activities and training exercises, handles celestial mechanics and mathematical formulae with ease, as well as excels in higher mathematics, does not feel constrained when he has to defend his point of view if he considers himself right. It's a very poetic way of doing it, but of course there could be something added or lost in translation there. In other words, he doesn't hold back. He's very forthright in his opinion if he thinks he's right. I'm not going to try and praise myself, but that's the way I am. If I think I'm right, if I know I'm right, if I have some good evidence or rationale to say I'm right, and nobody else is doing anything other than just saying, no, you're wrong, I disagree, but they're not bringing any even rationale to their refutation, and then of course I'm going to say I'm right as well, you know? So I guess it depends on the context there anyway, if he's got some rationale, but I would say that he does. I think that's what they're saying, that he's assertive when it matters, when it's correct to be. And he appears that, but I'll say again, I don't want to say that I'm trying to go, oh, I'm like him. You know? He appears that he understands life better than a lot of his friends. Now I found that very interesting. Because I think it's only now that I'm starting to understand, you know, that because life seems to be a test, and by its definition, you can't know for sure that it's a test. And God can't come to you and say, yeah, this is the test, I'm hoping you're going to do well on it. Because that would mess up the whole point of the test. But, so you can never be sure, but as life goes on, you start thinking to yourself, yeah, I want to balance this with not trying to ascribe any more importance to my own meaningless life any more than it does. It might be meaningless, you might just be born, you have a life and you die, just maybe that's all any organism does, but I don't want to say, oh, but I'm special, so I must have, like, my life must have meaning, or a human being's life must have meaning. I want to balance holding that thought in my head with also sort of saying that there does seem to be unusual things going on here, and looking at language and looking at the stories we've been told and looking at the way history, in heavy inverted commas, quotation marks, goes and has been told to us, and the way, if we look into anything, we keep seeing repeated patterns. There seems to be something, well, I'm trying to choose between any number of ways of sort of saying this. There seems to be an undercurrent that flows underneath all things, a common thread that ties everything together. There seems to be a devil in the details, or God, from the omega to the omicron, from the from the major to the minor, and from as above to so below. There seems to be a mirror image and a carbon copy and a repeating pattern going through everything. You know, oh, us pattern noticers. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. Slowboy says James Lovell. Maybe was he an American test fighter pilot? I think I was thinking of Chuck Yeager if he's one. And Abraxas says no pressure. Roll with it. Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm gonna just quickly look up Chuck Yeager, just to satisfy myself that, you know, he's some kind of American World War II flying ace. Yeah, so I think I was in the right ballpark there. And James Lovell, or Lovell, American astronaut as well. Okay. I think his picture looks familiar. But yeah, I mean, there's still so much of the Apollo story that I'm ignorant of, you know. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And also, I'll say this. Anytime I read a psychological evaluation, not that I do it often, but any evaluation of anybody, and I did as part of my work at one point, I taught people stuff, and I was also then asked to evaluate how well my teaching was doing by how well they retained it. And I don't like testing people with sort of, well, certainly not with just multiple choice. Does he remember this? Does he remember that? Because it's not about retention. Like, to learn something means to sort of assimilate it into your character in the way that you do things. Not just, do I remember like a robot how to do certain things? Do you understand? But however, I was tasked with writing ways to test people and to evaluate people that way. And also, when I was, you know, again, and this is not to say that I was anybody important, but coming from a sort of somebody who could evaluate people from their technical knowledge of, it doesn't matter, but anyway, to do with computer stuff, I'll say, I would I would sort of try to understand how it is that you can test people, and how it is that you can set yourself up as somebody who's in any position to test anybody else. And I would, of course, I would go look at other stuff, right? Courses that existed already, the people who created those courses, the people who created the tests or the exams for those courses. And I'd sort of say to myself, like, well, these people are making up a lot of this stuff. Who are they to say that's correct anyway? Now, there's certain things that work, and you can prove that it works by creating it, and it works in the real world. But if something stays theoretical, then it's just makey-uppy stuff, like a lot of this NASA stuff is, And so that's when I started getting very skeptical about a lot of these people who are calling themselves experts in stuff. Like, who are they to evaluate anybody else? And I take that to the nth level and say, what gives any human being the right to appraise or evaluate or estimate any other human being? If you see what I'm sort of saying. And so that's what I find fascinating about one human mind evaluating another human mind for its sort of appropriateness or for its fitness for anything. Because that presumes the one who's doing the testing is fit. Who's testing him? And what you find is, like, they go, oh, well, he's got a certificate from some university somewhere. And you kind of go, well, who's this university then? Because it's not a building. It's not just, a collection of buildings and, people walking around. It's the people in it, and that's going back to Matthew, or what's his name? Oh, no, Pirsig, anyway, is his name, Pirsig. Who talked about this very thing, that an institution is not the bricks and mortar, it's the people in it. And more than that, it's the ideas that the people sort of convey or put out into the world. Because the people come and go. So what exactly are these institutions conferring degrees and credentials, certificates that say, believe me, this person is qualified to evaluate these people, or to tell these people, yeah, you're good. We put the seal of approval on you, but not on others. Equally, they sort of say, oh, these other people don't have a degree from Yale or Harvard or whatever, or Duke or Baird. I'm a Baird man, like instead of a woman. Like, who exactly are these people? They might be vessels for seagoing snitches. So them putting the seal of approval on people, like we've seen with the fall of all the institutions in the Western world, it might actually mean that these people have less, or should have less, estimation than if they didn't have these sort of qualifications or credentials from these institutions. Hopefully I've set that out there, and hopefully I didn't sound arrogant while doing any of it. Slowboy says, you're getting there, John. Okay, good enough. Slowboy says, I realised it as a kid when they showed us a movie at school. The penguins swim under the water, just like birds fly in the sky. And schools of fish move under the water. Same with trees, rivers, and around. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the realisation that penguins are doing the exact same thing underwater as they do above water. They're still flying. That should have occurred to me. I did a lot of swimming when I was younger. And the idea was, again, to make yourself as streamlined and all this kind of thing. Exactly as you would if you were a bird or a plane or a spaceship flying through the air. And the waters above and the waters below are, even if we don't literally, and by the way, I'm fine if we do literally think there's water above, like there is in the sea. But we can also, and that's what I've come to accept, several things, certainly two or more things, can be true at the same time. When I started looking into what's called adiabatic cooling, or adiabatic cooling, which sounds like a highfalutin term, but, to do with HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. And this is to do with, I might as well say, it's to do with data centers. That if you add more water to the air, you increase its ability to absorb heat into any volume of air that you're pushing through these things, like, huge data centers that you want to cool down. And so you can save money by just simply adding water, increasing the humidity. And so then I realized, like, unless air is perfectly dry and arid, then even if we're not in the sea, we're still underwater. It's just a less percentage water. right? But as we know in science, technically, and it's the best kind of correct, as they say, we never leave the water. We're still fish in the water, swimming around. And we're like goldfish in a bowl who've never left the water, so we don't notice it anymore. But anyway, this idea of adding humidity is nothing new. The Greeks did it with putting urns outside on the windowsills and putting water on the outside of the urns. It would keep the stuff cool as the air was wicking away the water. And the Muslims in the desert, they would wet muslin cloth and put it outside of their huts. And they'd have a breeze going through their huts then. It's also called, in South Africa and Australia, it's called a bush fridge. You put your cheese and whatever you want, or your bread underneath that. Anyway, that's another tangent. I never mean to do these things, but whatever. I guess it's just eternal extrapolations. Slowboy says circulatory systems look when we get pumped with dye. Yeah. Again, I suppose I'll say this now in case I forget later. The constant companion is both above us and below. It's the satellite in the sky, and it's the other thing inside some people now. Fractals and whatnot. There is a thread throughout creation and shows the nature of the creator. I think that's in relation to, like, the devil and the details, as above and so below. But the devil can also be the Omicron. His style, if you will, says Slowboy. As the Mandelbrot set, K. Thanks, Modus, for that. Mandelbrot, yeah, the fractal stuff. There's Doc Holiday, Jack. Cheers, Jack. And Modus, cheers, yeah. Hot and cold aisles. Yes, all right, so Abraxas must know a bit about data centers there as well. We won't get into that now, but someday, maybe. But I've realised kind of thing, and I'm not trying to big it up, I've realised that, I might as well say that, no, I won't say this now. I'll move on, right? I'll get back on topic here. There was something else that I wanted to say that looked interesting to me. The Vanguard 6. Look, there's lots of things. A very, very long thing. I don't have any more time, really. I played at the beginning the little TV thing of him doing Khrushchev. If there's a little bit more time, I might meeting Khrushchev, doing Khrushchev. He nearly was. He was practically wearing the face off him. But he had this. I'll see if this comes through. Poyakali. No, it's Poyakala, not Poyakali. Poyakala. So that's like up and atom, but that's the Russian version of like let's go. Or what does he say? Lift off. No. Off we go. Goodbye. Until we meet soon, dear friends. And I played that video there on April 1961, newsreel of Gagarin arriving in Moscow to be greeted by First Secretary of the Politburo, whatever they call him, or of the Kremlin, Nikita Khrushchev. The motherland hears, the motherland knows. Amazing how Russia was the motherland, but maybe that's because Queen Sofia was there originally, I don't know, and the fatherland was Germany. Again, like, that was a brother war as well. There's a lot of similarities between Russia and Germany. Same word, Prost, to say cheers. Like, that's one thing anyway. But yeah, I think I've gone over time with a lot of stuff, so I'll just yeah, okay. So this is the part here, right? Okay. Colonel Vladimir Ivanovich Yadovsky, the head physician for Gagarin's flight, and Major General Alexander, I don't know why I'm putting myself through this, Nikolaevich Babiachuk, a physician flag officer on the Soviet Air Force General Staff to the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force. The Commission limited their selection to pilots between 25 and 30 years old. Okay, that seems very reasonable. You can understand that. The chief engineer of the program, Sergei Korolev, also specified that candidates to fit in the limited space in the Vostok capsule should weigh less than 72 kilograms. That's about 160 pounds. But here's the thing, and be no taller than 1.7 meters. That's 5'7" right? So tall kings are excluded, right? And Gagarin, though, was 1.57 meters tall. That is, I think, unusually small. That is 5'2" tall. And I think that's notable. I'm having difficulty believing that he was that small. I know that in horse racing, that they like jockeys to be very small. I suppose the obvious reason must be because then they're going to be much lighter, and the horse has less weight to carry, and any weight saving means they have an advantage. And a lot of those jockeys in horse racing can be, they look like dwarves. They look like little munchkins. But Yuri Gagarin, he doesn't look like he's that small. And there are some pictures of him here. And I think what I'll do is I'll see if I have a little slideshow here. I think I have a few of them loaded in here. If I can go through them. I thought it might be nice. I should have had these scrolling through what I was... and look, of course, some of those could be... Who knows if some of those are real, you know? And I noticed that as well, a big boy hamburger. Yeah, now there's Yuri Gagarin. But Big Boy, wasn't it the name of... I think it was the helium bomb, or sorry, hydrogen bomb. The bigger explosive, or was it bigger in size than the uranium bomb? Is that the idea? Again, I don't want to look it up now, but Big Boy, I think they had to be sort of saying like a play on that as well, but obviously that must be an ad for Bob's Big Burgers or Big Boy Hamburger. But anyway, the narrative was they were trying to outdo each other. Now there's... Yeah. Damn it, this isn't working out well, right? So there's Yuri Gagarin. He doesn't look weirdly small there to me. And that was a MiG of some kind there. It looks quite primitive. MiG-15 or something. And he died in that. Even though he wasn't allowed to go up in another mission after that. Tom Twain says, hey, Tom Cruise looks 6 foot tall in some movie scenes. Yeah, but I think like they do all sort of trickery to kind of do that. Slowboy says, we love tangents. Good, appreciate that. And Modus says, chat is talk idly, informal babble. Yeah. Well, then it means exactly what we think it means when we use it. If you looked that up there in etymology. There's a memorial of Sputnik, and that's in Spain of all places, but it looks like it. I thought, oh, Russia, that looks weirdly like a Hispanic place, but that is in Spain somewhere. Sputnik, and I'll get on to Sputnik now in a minute. But I just thought, yeah, the height thing was funny there. So there he is again. He doesn't look unusually small, and I'm gonna say he looks quite dashing. He looks photogenic. And everyone's super delighted to be around him. So, I don't know what the point is, really. But, I mean, in case there's any men these days who are sort of saying, damn, I wish I could be 6 foot tall. Well, if you were, you wouldn't be allowed to be a cosmonaut. You know what I mean? So, yeah, maybe that is a good enough point, you know? And it's amazing how that coin, that became a standard way of making coins now all around the world, a template. Not exactly what's etched into it, but that's the same way a €2 coin is made. And I remember before the euro came in, other coins in Europe, it might have been the escudo in Portugal or the peseta in Spain, maybe the Italian lira was that as well. I can't remember now, but maybe it was a lot of them. Maybe it was German Deutschmark went that way. Maybe they thought it was a new technique and they thought it was brilliant. They thought it was real clever that they could heat the outside and then contract it around a different metal. Maybe they just thought it was such a cool thing. Now that is an artist's rendition of Sputnik, and they admit these kind of things now. Whereas before, if people would believe, oh, that must be a real photograph, they just allow people to continue believing that. Like other things, if it works, you can believe it. We're not going to run towards you and tell you, oh no, that's fake. I'll just say the word soap. Right, there, what I've, and I'll say this, right, because seeing as we're far enough into this stream, and a few of you are here now, I shared a few things today, or start from yesterday. I might as well say what they are. I think I will, right? Quick pause now, just to say, I shared something, and it's by a fellow called Father, oh God, what's his name? James Maudsley, Mawdsley, and his channel is called something like Scripture and Tradition, something along those lines. Scripture and Tradition, Father James Maudsley. Maybe his first name isn't James, but Maudsley anyway. And I know that probably everybody here does know damn well these things, but he has put them out in a very, like, on YouTube. It's on YouTube, and it's been on YouTube now for at least a day, about things like soap and things for shading light and things like that. And I want to say that I think you're going to like watching this, just to sort of see how it's clear to me now that things I think are becoming mainstream. But unfortunately, what I think is that's not going to help any. I think that's still part of the plan. It's part of the process of revelation of the method. And I'll do a stream talking about that another time. But of course, it's very difficult to talk about these things on here. But if everybody had seen this, then we could talk about things in a way that we kind of go, yeah, we understand now where we are and stuff like that. Like, but I would like to. Also, I put out a couple of videos on Odyssey and replicated it onto Rumble. And I've shared a few other things on Odyssey as well. And like, even though I think I kind of, listen, I'm up to date now, I do still learn, if not exactly new things, I learn things that supplement the knowledge that I have in a way that gives me an extra perspective on things. And I'll just say, for balance, for this thing from Father Maudsley that I'm recommending that you watch, I have come to realize that, I think we all know this as well, the higher order ones of them will sacrifice the lower order ones of them. No problem. And the lower order ones of them aren't part of the plan because they're too stupid as well to get it. But they parrot these things, and they seem to believe these things. They're dangerous that way. But as well, they don't know what's going on either. So, like, it's not as simple as it's that group, if you know what I'm saying, right? Just because I want to make sure that people know that I'm not just pointing at them and saying if we did something to them, everything would be okay. It wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? So, and then the other thing then is, and it ties into this, right? I shared a thing from Jimmy Dore. He is great, even though he's a liberal or a lefty, but he's a reformed kind of lefty. And again, another thing that's being mainstreamed is that, like, there seem to be basically sort of I think Jimmy Dore is helping to do this, mainstreaming the idea that, like, they did do everything that they denied that they were doing, like in 2020. They did everything and more, all of it. But unfortunately, if they drip feed this information out, it's like a pressure release valve where still nothing gets done. And then if you say to any of the ones who've been denying it, now, do you see we were right? Then they'll say, oh, everyone knows that. That's old news. That's what always happens. And nothing still changes. Just everybody sort of gradually just seems to accept that that's what happened. And we just move on. And there's never any consequences, and there's never any... What's the word I should say? There's never any accountability, right? And these people then, like the good doctor there, I say that in ironic terms, they always end up slipping off into their mausoleums, right? I'll say. Never, ever having to suffer any earthly accountability. And for me, that is a source of endless frustration. And I don't know that there's an afterlife, right? I don't know that there is. I don't have this belief that other people do, this unshakable belief or knowledge that it does exist. So it's not good enough for me to sort of say, they'll get what's coming to them, like in the afterlife. Not good enough for me. I just cannot stand that this is the constant pattern, that there's a slow, gradual revelation of bits and pieces of the thing. And therefore, nothing ever changes down here. And that's why I think like this place has gone from being purgatory to being literally hell itself. But anyway, that's the interlude. But I shared that other thing from Jimmy Dore. And if you would like to go and check out my Odyssey site, um, I would like to in future have another live stream there where maybe some of you could come along and listen there. And I think that I'd be able to, no, I would be able to speak more freely, but I also think there'd be a little bit less pressure on me then as well. You know, that kind of thing to be constantly checking, am I still live? Am I seeing it sort of way? But anyway, Tom Twain there says, I think that Mig is really a Rolls Royce in Trabant's clothing. Yeah, maybe. And certainly, in case you didn't know, maybe everyone does know this, I saw a documentary years ago on Concorde, and there was Concordsky, and they basically just copied. They called it the TU something or other, TU something 09, and it was basically a copy of Concorde, which was French and British. Well, so they tell us anyway. Lily Gazoo says, listening at the library, that's amazing. I'll say this, right? During the week, I better say it this way, right? I'll recommend this guy to you. He's a Rhodesian living in South Africa. His name is Jan Lamprecht. I have been extremely impressed with him. And he has spoken to some of the greats in America. Should I say their names? Look, any of the greats you can think of in America. To do with trying to wake up Americans and Europeans from their slumber and their guilt, self-guilt, pity, the blaming themselves for all the ills of the world, these kind of things, right? And their own identity and consciousness. He's spoken to several of them, and they respect him and he respects them. And I like listening to him. I love his accent. I spent a lot of time in South Africa, and I haven't been there now in a few years, really, and unfortunately, and I miss South Africa, and I miss hearing voices like his. And one of the things in South Africa, as a mark of respect, it's a Germanic thing. And I think it's translated into a lot of people in America there as well, who might be from these kind of cultural backgrounds in maybe Scandinavia or Germanic, that you call any man, as a sign of respect, you call him uncle. You know, like having respect for your elders, you know. So it's like hearing an uncle, you know. And I just, if you look up his channel, it's called History Reviewed, I think is what it is. It's not this other guy now that's on YouTube. It's not History Debunked or whatever he calls himself. Anyway, a tangent on a tangent. He has a few things that pop up on his website, and it recommended a book. And I asked Lily if she'd ever read this. Maybe she had. And I can't say the name of the book because it's completely on the nose. It's very much on the nose, but I'll say the name of the author. It's Hilaire Belloc. He was a French writer, but my God, you should see the English that he wrote in, like far more fluent English than I could speak. Amazing. Anyway, and very sort of 18th century, sorry, very 19th century way of writing, very sort of late 1800s, early 1900s way of writing. And the book came out in 1922. And it's talking about the same problems that we're having now. Like, again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But it may be... So and by the way, if you want to know a bit about it, I read a sort of a summary chapter by chapter of it, and I put it on my Odyssey there as well. You can listen to that as well. I know maybe one or two of you might have done that already. And it made me realize like that, yeah, it's like Solzhenitsyn then, and you know, how many 100 years together and this kind of thing. This is an ongoing problem, but and while we probably do, and I'm not trying to say that I'm a peacenik or any of this stuff, but we have to be very careful that if the tide does turn, and it might, that could be part of their plan. And if there is a devil, that this is part of his plan then, to sort of say, yes, I create... It's like when you know, when I can't think of these sort of office toys where you create a momentum in something and then you shake that momentum to something else, and then you double the momentum by adding those two things to each other, and on and on and on. And that could be the way that that if the devil, if we think of him now as an actual entity with his own motivations and drives and ability to influence people, that the backlash that he's looking for, a bit like Norm Macdonald now, if there was a dirty bomb in America, I'd be worried about the backlash against the Muslims. But I don't mean to sound like that, but we have to entertain that possibility, especially if you look at one of the, well, at this guy Maudsley's, Father Maudsley, his video, and the one I did up of, I can't say the name of it, but anyway, her name is Rachel, right? And she's talking about showers that she went into, right? Like, she's not clever enough to figure it out, that what she's saying doesn't make sense. But also, you can't make somebody make sense of something when it works in their favor. Just like, you can't make a man understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. So there's a sort of a willful stupidity going on that I see as being common to all human beings, right? And so I do understand that these people are also human beings, but that there are common traits that go through history with them. So it is like hundreds of years together. But we do have to be very careful to be righteous and not indiscriminate in our anger, is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I'll catch up with some of the comments there. I hope that came across clear enough. I'll clarify a bit more if that's not clear. So that was all off the bat of Lily being at the library. Tom Twain says, hey, there's nothing wrong with a bit of animation. They fooled everyone with the corona. Oh, God. I can't touch too many live wires. It's very silly of me. With the malarkey. Slowboy says, I uploaded something on Rumble that I think really encapsulates what's been going on in the West the past few decades, but unfortunately it's not safe for this platform. All right, I didn't know that you had a Rumble, but obviously I'm going to check it out now. A Rumble presence, what's it called? Rumble account. I'll check that out. Really needs to be heard over there, though, or over here, though. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll check it out anyway, and we'll see what we do. Tom Twain says, yeah, they offered up Prince Charles, mate, Jimmy Savile, for scapegoating. After death, of course. Oh, yeah. And so that works on a lot of people. They go, oh, well, like as Bill Gates says about, well, I won't say his name, but Epstein, Jeff. Well, you know what I mean, right? As Bill Gates says about him, well, he's dead now, so we might as well just move on. Problem solved, done and dusted. The world is put to right now. Tom says the reverse engineered Russian Concorde got airborne first. Oh, did it? Right. There is a devil, says Tom Twain. I think I found him first. Then God had to be real. Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's logic. That's perfectly cromulent logic. That if the devil exists, then God must. And why is that? Well, it's because if God didn't exist, the devil would do what he liked. He wouldn't have to sneak around. He's clearly an adversary. He is playing a grand game of chess. If there wasn't either an agreed upon set of rules or rules that are being imposed upon him that he has to play by, then he would just make up whatever rules that he wanted to play by in order for him to win immediately, without all this faffing about, So that's one way of sort of exploring the logic of it, but I won't get bogged down in that either. The Belloc book is available on Project Gutenberg. Oh yeah, but what I'm saying is if you want to listen to me reading out, I guess I found a version that has a summary of it chapter by chapter. So if you want to listen to me reading it out, and I don't know if I come across a bit funny reading it, but I know what I do sometimes. I'm apologizing in advance. What I sort of try and do is read it in a bit more of an erudite tone to sort of do justice to the book, or maybe I feel like this is the way he'd want it to be read, in a very grand way. Maybe it doesn't sound any different at all. But I sometimes cringe when I hear myself playing it back. Right? Anyway, I think, sometimes my contribution to maybe other people's time is to read it out so they can do something for a half an hour while they're listening to it, if you see what I mean. Right, so there you are anyway. That's why I did it. I'll move on anyway. The Belloc book is available there, and Jeff Steen McGaffrey, exactly. If I were the devil, said Paul, or by Paul Harvey. Exactly, I've heard that one as well. Right, I'll get back to it here anyway. That's a good one. And what I wanted to say was then, anyway, Yuri is the light of the tabernacle or the light of the world as he travels around. And I'll give myself a quick break, and what I'll do is I will play my short from a while ago, because I think maybe it's no harm to remind you guys, because you wouldn't be that many people listening in the beginning, right? So I'm just going to play this now, right? If you remember the TV series Lost, doesn't matter what you think about it, remember the numbers. The last number was 108. Now, I went on forums and everybody discussed what all the numbers meant. I think everybody was coming from an assumption that it was a sequence of numbers. However, the number 108, I don't remember anybody ever mentioning the fact that Yuri Gagarin in 1961 circumnavigated the Earth in 108 minutes. And guess what? The distance between the Sun and the Earth is 108 times the Sun's diameter. And the distance between the Moon and the Earth is 108 times the Moon's diameter. And you can be sure there's more to it than that as well. But that's all the time that I have for now. All right, so just kind of wanted a reminder about that. So also to remember, also to bring into this, the TV show Lost. I'm not sure if many of you have seen it, or if you have and you thought it was rubbish. I've said recently, and I'll say it again, I'll say a bit more on it. It ties in, if nothing else, it ties in the space race, and it ties in ancient Bible stuff. Well, and by the way, I mean, you can say that those are fake if that's basically the inference you draw from that. I'm not saying that they are fake. I'm saying it's highly suspicious. I'm also saying that it could be just we're talking about ratios here, and if everything is unfolding the way it has to unfold according to the rules of whatever universe or galaxy has been created, whatever shape it is that maybe that's the way it would have to be. Sometimes you find these numbers that have to be that way, like with pi and stuff like that they are the ratios of the radius to the circumference, or the arc that or the angle of the arc that goes around from the center, goes into a hemisphere exactly 3.14 times, this kind of thing. So I'm not disagreeing with you either that they could be fake. I'm just sort of saying it's very curious, that I kind of, maybe I'll mess it up now by sort of saying that the circumference from the Earth, or the circumference of the Earth rather, the distance from the Earth to the Moon, what did they say, is 108 times the circumference of the Moon, is that it? And the distance from the Earth to the Sun is 108 times the circumference of the Sun, something along those lines anyway. You heard it in the short there. It's just highly coincidental, right? And that number, 108, is the summation of the magic numbers in the Valenzetti equation in Lost, 108, right? And that they say Yuri Gagarin circumnavigated the Earth in 108 minutes. And I agree with you, Slowboy. Like, I mean, when something's unfalsifiable, then that's not science. That's just them making up virtual worlds. You might as well just make up like, these massively multiplayer virtual worlds in a computer game. So we are in agreement. I just want to make sure that there's a balance to what I'm saying, that I don't know for a fact that it's false, but I also do think that there's also some validity to the idea that sometimes things have to be certain ways, that ratios, you kind of go, oh, that's curious that we have this number, but then you kind of look into it a bit more, you go away and you think about it, and you come back and you go, oh, it has to be that way. The ratios are there, this sort of stuff. But anyway, so Slowboy there says, I don't know if the theoretical physicists and whatnot can be believed when it's unfalsifiable evidence. So I do agree with you there. In other words, like, they shouldn't be believed, right? Because everything that they've done, especially since 2020, has been to take whatever trust that any sane people like us would have given to them, and they would have sullied it. They stamped it into the mud, into the dirt. They talked about how they own the science, like, which means that it's like sort of it's like what's that? I'm trying to think of that fable where somebody's holding a butterfly in his hands, but he crushes the butterfly because he wants to possess it so much. So I know I've messed up that metaphor, but you have to let the butterfly free for it to do its thing. You can't pin it to a board and say, that's mine, I own it. I was trying to put it in sort of poetic language, but these people reveal who they are, how they don't get it. They don't understand science by claiming that they can trademark it and patent it and say, put a wall around it and say, that's ours. They don't understand the scientific method. It's a contradiction in terms to say that nobody else can look into it, Dr. Crispy there says, Slow Boy's circumference is also 180. Okay. Slow Boy says, yeah, true. We can't know if it's true or false. Yeah, and look, again, I'm not trying to be, a hurler on the fence, as I say. I'm not trying to be equivocal or to equivocate on any of this stuff. You understand. I'm actually trying to show you that, or set out for the record, that this is how science should be, and them trying to dictate how science is completely the antithesis to science. So whatever trust that we gave them, I rescind. I'll never trust them again. And in fact, I'm not going to be happy with, we have new people now in charge of this, that, there. No, I want every institution razed to the ground. I treat this like that there has been, like, say, a computer virus on a hard drive. Some people are satisfied with just sort of running some antivirus software, and the software says, that virus is gone now. No, for me, I'll have my data backed up elsewhere, and I will wipe that hard drive absolutely clean and put a new operating system on it, or get a new hard drive. You know what I mean? So not good enough if they tell me that they've cleaned up their act. It'll never be good enough, And Erastus Turnip Seed says, and this bird you cannot change. Yes, free bird. 180 centimeters, right? Okay. I like that, right? Clever ways to call somebody fat. Anyway, I'll move on to Soyuz. And just to say, Soyuz means union. And I put in the... so the title of this I called Fellow Travelers, right? Or Constant Companion. And now we're far enough into it. Like, so in the, sort of nod and a wink, brotherhood, Sons of May, secret societies, one of the ways that they sort of recognize what they call a fellow traveler, another member of the guild, another mason who's free to go about plying his trade in whatever city he wants to go work in. I'm kind of surmising that's how it came about originally, like, from, like, even Leonardo da Vinci, like, he was in much demand to go around doing stonework and this kind of thing and create statues and whatnot. So I guess it did come out of actually doing masonry. But they would recognize each other by, nodding the wink and touching the elbows and doing all these kind of funny handshakes. But if it didn't want to be that obvious, it was like, using certain esoteric words or phrases. And one of them was like, you meet somebody on a train, where are you traveling? I'm traveling east. And you can imagine them on the Orient Express. I'm traveling east. Are you traveling east? Having a good laugh about it. Haha, we're all traveling east. We're all fellow travelers. And so it's saying, I'm another member of the guild. And of course, if they're going to Vladivostok, they are traveling east. And with the two-headed bird, looking east, looking west, there's a synthesis of east and west going on there. Also with the cosmonauts and the NASA astronauts. And I think we know as well, of course, don't have time to go into it or try and see if we can call up proof here, that Russia, or the Russian space program, or the cosmonauts, were maybe not officially, but they were known to their governments. They were trading information and training information trading training information. And they were going to each other's bases and comparing notes and this kind of thing, helping each other. So Soyuz means a union and a coming together and a synthesis. So again, in the sort of twilight language of the Brotherhood, it's a syncretion. It's a solve et coagula. It's a coagulation. And I'll just take this off screen so I can share my screen. I'll take the pretty picture off the screen there so I can, if you remember, not that one, share my screen there. I'm on Soyuz there. So that's their spacecraft. And so union, but you can translate it several ways. I think I might have Soyuz meaning here. I'll close a few tabs here. Sorry for the dead air there. Right, maybe I didn't mean to put that up on screen just yet. Somebody mentioned it already, so I think I will put it up on screen, but try to avoid the word. So, you know, when I mentioned the as above, so below. Oh yeah, I didn't finish the lost thing. I'll just say this because I just saw Lily's. And then I go back there. Oh, sorry, Michelangelo was the sculpture. Yeah, I'll take that correction. Yeah, thanks for that. Did he do the Trevi Fountain, or who was that? The first 23 numbers of the Fibonacci code total 108. Do they? Okay. Well, as far as I remember, anyway, the Valenzetti equation was 4, 5, 16, 23. 46, 108. I think that was it. I can't remember. Along those lines, anyway. And I do know, like, I used to take part in the discussions online in Lost, and I think we're going back to 2010, maybe even before that. And it was great because, it was the biggest show and the biggest production ever, and maybe since. Most amount of money gone into it, and I did say before, and I'll say again, I do intend, maybe I'm not going to do it this weekend now, but maybe next weekend I might start, or maybe during the week, a watch along. I'll see if I can get away with doing that on Odyssey. A watch along of Odyssey, of Lost from beginning to end, because I think that it explains everything, the history of mankind, the 2,000 years together, or 8,000, 6,800, 8,000 years, however long we've been together, and the tribes separated and became enemies. And it explains everything up until the space race in the 60s and where we are now. And it explains why people are the way they are. It explains why what the hell's going on, basically. Like, why these people hate us so much. And how they can identify each other. And on and on and on. It explains the sort of the characters anyway, it has the space race in it. It has certain things in history we can't really talk about. It has heaven and hell, heaven and earth. It has spiritual, supernatural stuff going on. And it has references that you can see, that it's very clearly making sure that, like, those with eyes that can see, that I'm not saying I can see everything now, but going back over it, I bet you I'll be able to see things that maybe weren't as obvious now. To a lot of people, because back then in maybe it was 2008 to 2010, like, there was podcasts, there was discussions online on forums, people discussed what every aspect of every show might be, and it was incredible to have the whole world talking about this stuff. And now hardly anybody talks about it at all. So I would like to go through it, like, and maybe do it on Odyssey live streams, and, you know, if there's only one or two people watching along, yeah, well, that'll be good company. Just to see, like, you know, what we can get through and notice, like, because I'm going to say this. I think, you know, there was a writer's strike that interrupted maybe season 3 or season 4 or something like that. Just like they will take down a whole plane just to get one person and then hide the fact that it was a single person's assassination amongst all that collateral damage. I think, you know, call me crazy if you want, but maybe you won't. Maybe you'll go, oh yeah, of course. I think they did the writer's strike to basically pull that show from the air, because I think somebody or several people were not happy that this show was basically explaining stuff to people, putting it in visual imagery in front of people, and people were decoding the stuff, like, in other words, trying to make sense of what they were being shown. It was showing a lot of sort of Kabbalistic, esoteric stuff and philosophy, and putting what you call Easter eggs, like where you put them in DVDs and little things in scenes, there might be a painting somewhere, a picture, or a book on a coffee table, or the characters' names were very meaningful, That's great. That's I like those little synchronicities. Dr. Crispy Rothschild says it's 1:08 a.m. now. He was counting from 1:06, 1:07. And I didn't even realise that's what he was doing, because he was doing 1.06. Just goes, Joe, just change one slight thing from a colon. I didn't recognise it as time. I was thinking he was working out some kind of calculation. Lily says, in Ayurveda, 108 pressure points in the body. Okay. Tom Twain says the Trevi Fountain is much later than Michelangelo's era. Ah, okay. And Dr. Crispy says it's 1:08 a.m. Cheers. Slowboy says Odyssey never seems to work right for me. Yeah, and like, it's not going to be perfect. I'll do it as an experiment, but also, and I've heard it's not just me, Rumble doesn't work properly either. Like, you think you've uploaded something but it doesn't play, and it doesn't give you any sort of signs to sort of say that it's trying to play. It doesn't give any sort of twirling signs, that kind of way, or loading signs. Just nothing. Just doesn't do whatever. It just doesn't play. And curiously enough, like, if you upload something and then you go to view it, it then says, oh, now I'm encoding it, and it always starts at 33% encoding. It's weird. Or it says, like, waiting for an encoding server to claim the thing to encode your video after you've uploaded it. And it says, waiting at 33%. And some people have said that their videos get stuck at 33%, which is curious. And I think somebody must have done that deliberately to sort of say, we'll start the encoding process at an arbitrary 1/3 is done. So Lily says Rumble is terrible. Now, it seems to be, I don't know, I presume you're still talking about the technical aspects of it rather than just the content or the general how would you say, culture of the place there. Another aspect of it is that there's something not right about the viewing figures. I think a lot of the viewing figures are false. I think they're inflated, because there's videos there that have thousands and thousands of views, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of views, and they might have 2 or 3 comments. That's not believable. Then we have to assume that most people, the vast majority, 99.999% of people, watch videos on Rumble without creating an account. I don't believe that. And there's other things as well. Oh yeah, so many bots saying, hi, my name is blah blah blah, and your channel is amazing. I've just watched some of your videos; they're so cool. But I don't know why you don't have so much engagement. You should write me at this Gmail address, and I'll fix that. Or Telegram me or whatever, or get me on WhatsApp. It's just nonsense. Anyway, gone way off tangent. But yeah, that's something I'd like to just get going. And even if it's not that popular or whatever, just see how we go. So I'm just letting you know. Right, so neither is perfect, but I'll give Odyssey a go first anyway. There's a thumbs down from Modus. He says Rumble is thumbs down. Crispy says, in reality, they invented numbers just to annoy me because I suck at math. I'll say this last thing and then move on, right? And it ties up with noticing words, right? I think today, but I think people hate admitting these kind of things, these realizations, right? So I'm nearly a half century old, and I only kind of said to myself today, oh, subtraction. It's subtraction. Traction is like, pulling, right? And sub is under. So subtraction means to pull under, or to make less in that sense. And I don't think that had ever occurred to me. And I know people don't like admitting these things because then everyone else kind of goes, duh, you didn't know that. We always got that sort of thing at even in primary school, particularly, oh, you didn't know that. You must be stupid, that sort of way. But every day, when I just want to think, listen, I've finished learning now, okay? I never do, because every day then another realization or something, new piece of information comes to me and I kind of go, oh God, how did I not know that? Or that actually brings my understanding of something from 2D to a more 3D version, you know. Lily says, tangents, that's how we know you aren't AI. Appreciate that. I like that. And I've often thought as well how a human being can tell he doesn't live in a simulation is when he gets pimples on his face or dandruff in his hair. The AI wouldn't bother simulating those things, would it? You know, a bit like the black cat in the Matrix or whatever, you know. Tom Twain says, I tend to only watch YouTube. Odyssey and other platforms are echo chambers for those who just seek validation. Maybe. What I've noticed about Rumble is that it seems to be like a trap for the sort of alt-right type stuff, you know? And I'm not so sure if people really want to take things to, you know, what right-wing really should be, which should be absolute, complete and total pinning the needle to 11 free speech, you know? Not just going back over what we already know or kind of going like, you know, oh, will Donald Trump do this in the elections and will somebody else do that in the elections, you know, this kind of way. If I Slowboy there. I just want to see if there's one or two last messages. Slowboy says, BitChute, Fumble and Odyssey have great content but bad user interfaces and bad connection. Agreed. And I haven't used BitChute in a long time and won't, because basically anything worth watching on BitChute is blocked in the whole of Europe. And I'm not going to slow things down further by trying to load up a VPN and all that sort of stuff, you know. Moda says, I was on Rumble 2 weeks, had to uninstall. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. I'll get back to this anyway. So Sputnik. I'll just do a brief little read of it and then, you know, get to what my salient point of Sputnik is. Sputnik, the satellite, was the first artificial Earth satellite. It was launched into an elliptical low Earth orbit by the Soviet Union on 4th of October 1957 as part of the Soviet space program. It sent a radio signal back to Earth for 3 weeks before its 3 silver zinc batteries became depleted. Aerodynamic drag caused it to fall back into the atmosphere on 4th of January 1958. The world's first observation was made at the school observatory in Rodesvich or Vich in Saxony. Look, I'm sure some of these numbers are good, like 65-degree orbital inclination. I'm pretty sure I remember that nothing goes below 66 degrees or 65 point something to Antarctica. But anyway, I won't read any more into that because I've gone far over the time that I meant to. The geophysical year, that was part of it as well, from 1957. That was part of the wonders of the geophysical year, which again I only learned about a few years ago. Maybe come up to 2020. Etymology is what I wanted to get to anyway, right? Romanized as Sputnik Odin. Now, Odin is what Wednesday is named after, the Norse god Odin, the father of Thor, as far as I remember, of Thursday, you know. So again, Russia encapsulating the sort of Scandinavian element of culture there. But Sputnik was coined in the 18th century by combining the prefix S, just the letter S dash for fellow, and Putnik, meaning traveller. So Sputnik more literally means fellow traveller. Now that absolutely, as I've said, that is the Sons of May. That is their nod and a wink, esoteric phrase to mean, are you a member of the same organisation I'm a member of? You're in the same, you may be not in the same lodge as I'm in, but we're from different lodges, but we're fellow travellers. And if you travel east, you're going back to be reborn. If you're travelling west, you're going to expire. I won't say, yeah. You're going to go down in a ball of flames and then rise from the ashes like the phoenix in Phoenix, Arizona, I suppose, if you're travelling west from their perspective. And if you're travelling east, you're going to maybe Japan, the land of the rising sun, or you're going to Vladivostok to meet the rising sun. And all of that esoteric symbology that goes with that. So Sputnik means fellow traveller. And of course, you can see how it fits with the idea of a satellite above your head. And if it is in geostationary orbit, no, actually Sputnik isn't. That's the satellites we have now. They're travelling with us. But if you are travelling, right, from west to east. And I was looking through this to see, like the astronauts from Cape Canaveral, and again, or Cape Kennedy, if we do just accept their story for the way they tell it, if they do launch people out of Cape Kennedy, Cape Canaveral in Florida in that easterly direction, and they say, by the way, that they like to do that so that if anything goes wrong, they're not over a populated area, and that they can then eject and rescue people from sea. But that's not exactly going to work, I wouldn't have thought, in Russia. But I don't remember or don't know offhand where they launched from. But that same idea, they're going to be launching over their own Russian territories or their oblasts or regions or provinces, going over to Vladivostok before they circumnavigate the Earth. But anyway, fellow traveller, if you're moving or if you're stationary, he's with you all the time. He's your fellow traveller. He's your constant companion. The other meaning there, it says, a meaning corresponding to the Latin root sateles. So satellites, sateles, is a guard, an attendant, or a companion. So again, guard, attendant, and a companion. A guard could be a protector from, or something that wards off something. And a companion then stays with you to defend you against something. So again, we can see how then if we move on to this, right? So what's that about Trump and Clinton? Sputnik news agency, right? Again, constant companion. I think I'll skip over that for now. If I feel this time, I'll come back to it. So, but here's, and I won't say it on screen now, but again, I don't want to give away any code words. I guess you can read it there, right? But the thing that happened in 2020, and then they supposedly created a cure for the thing that happened in 2020. Well, the Russians called that Sputnik. And I guess you can see why now, right? So maybe it's a guard, maybe it's a defender in that sense, but it's also a constant companion. And it's a fellow traveller. And where does it travel? Well, as above, so below. It travels within your own bloodstream. To me, like when I didn't just discover it recently, but I didn't discover it today, but I don't know how recently it was that I discovered it. I think more than a year ago. And this is something I kind of thought, listen, everyone knows this probably. But I just, even if they do, I haven't seen anyone put this out there. And I just figured, it's one of those things I need to get around to putting it out there. And by the way, I have lots of other things that I want to talk about. And I nearly didn't go live tonight. I kind of thought, I'll leave it till next weekend. And I'm coming to the realization that I don't know how much time I have left. I'm not that old now. I'm only coming towards a half a century. But I am now realizing more and more as every day goes by how life is slipping away from me and how nobody knows the hour of the day. Put it that way. The hour or the day. You know that way? Not trying to say anything's imminent. I'm just sort of saying I grow increasingly conscious of my own mortality. And again, if there's an afterlife, I don't want to regret through laziness or lack of motivation or just inertia that I didn't put in at least, some effort while I had some time, So it really is that, because I didn't see anybody else mentioning this, I think it's worth mentioning. And I think, again, I don't want to overstate the obvious. Of course, I can't speak too freely on this, but I think you understand what I'm talking about here. That the thing that travels with you far above your head also travels with some people now inside them constantly. It's their constant companion and fellow traveller. So Tom Twain says, I'd hate to know everything. It'd be so boring not to find out new things. Yeah, and look, I've always been curious. Curiosity, killed the cat and all that. But maybe that's just a phrase to ward people off from looking for the truth. But there's a beautiful phrase, and I think it's from Ecclesiastes. And I'm going to do it justice if I can. I think it's Ecclesiastes 1:19. And I'm going to look it up now. put it in, I think, recently one of my videos, I think, or maybe I intended to and haven't put it out yet. Um, Ecclesiastes 119. I'll just see if I'm right on this. No, it's not that. Maybe it's 1:9. Yes. Oh no. That's what has been will be again. What has been done will be so done again, and there's nothing new under the sun. Well, the other thing was it's I think it's from the Wisdom of Solomon. Um, that the more knowledge grows, so does grief. I didn't want to butcher it, but I'll look it up now just so I get it right. So does sorrow. Damn it, did I hit escape there at last moment? Or didn't hit enter? So close, Ecclesiastes 1:18. My God, it was one off. The concept that more knowledge grows, so does sorrow, is a profound and timeless idea that has been explored in various philosophical and literary works. Okay, good. Come on, get on with it. In the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, the author writes, "For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." I'll leave that. That's it anyway, you know. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, like so many things. Um, about BitChute, Slowboy says, yeah, it's crazy. BitChute comes out of England and the English can't watch it. It's mad. Yeah, it's insane in the membrane. There's Loki Garfield. Greetings. Lily says, welcome. I used to watch it for Irish stuff, says Crispy. Okay. I thought the Black Knight satellite was up before Sputnik. I don't know, to be honest with you, because I don't think I've heard of the Black Knight. But even if that's the case, Sputnik seems to be the one that has gone down in history books as being the one that started the space race, and the rivalry, like really sort of symbolized the rivalry between the two great superpowers. And Tom Twain says, "I like to everything there is a season." Yeah, so that's a bit like something along the lines of, what is it? There's a time for every idea, or a time comes for every idea. I messed it up. But anyway, look, I'll get back here to what I was trying to do. Right? Just to try and underscore here, without being able to talk about it, unfortunately, in very explicit terms. So I'll call it the scene, right? So the VidCon scene, there it is, right? And they've got a kind of stylized, I think they've stylized the P there in Sputnik, but again, we might see some interesting transliteration there. So K is a hard C, and then the B, if you can see it, is really V. So that you can translate it and see that it does say that on their vials there. And again, like, so again, in their own story, this is what they say it looks like, and this is what they say that it was, a demi-pan, and so on and so on. But that's not what I'm trying to get into. I'm just sort of saying, to me, and I hope that it's clear to you, that the idea of a constant companion that you can't get rid of, a fellow traveller, all the Masonic symbology that we've gone over there, right, or that I've introduced, right, that we have the capsule, the light of God, in Yuri. We have Vostok traveling to the east. And we have Soyuz, a union, a fusion, a syncretion, a coagulation. Right? And again, I'm saying coagulation again, maybe best not say it in the chat, but you know that we've found these things coagulated inside people's bloodstream, you know, that kind of way as well. I mean, there's, and like we talked about already, of course, I don't need to spell these things out. There are multiple meanings for every word that we can kind of go, from slightly different angles. Now I see what that means from that angle, but it's the same word all the time. So I really do think that there's enough there to say that I haven't proven anything, But like we were talking about at the beginning here, there is like circumstantial evidence to say that, for me, of course, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's crazy. You're just clutching at straws there." To me, that's enough circumstantial evidence. If you're trying this in a court to sort of say far more than like OJ saying if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. There's enough circumstantial evidence there to say things are not just so at random chance for no reason. Names are selected because they mean something in a compendium together when put together. They imply things. They paint a picture with the words. These words are part of a lexicon that go into a single book. And that whole book is this narrative or this grand web that they've been weaving, or this fabric of a narrative that they've been stitching together over generations of people. Because I wasn't alive in the 60s. And of course, even if people are, nowadays, even if people would have been alive, say, in the 90s, if, I don't know how much they've been paying attention, nothing really to politics or world affairs between the age of 1 and 10. So even people born in the early 90s, who would be 30 by now, they wouldn't barely remember anything that we think is like only yesterday in the 90s, And so there's a lot of things we might think, oh, we don't need to tell people about because it's sort of take it for granted that everybody knows. But like, even things like the Beatles being in concert and things that I wouldn't have been really conscious of how, I heard later, yeah, how much of a cultural significance that was. But that was all part of, the whole, the tragedy of Kennedy being shot. And then probably only about a month later or so, a few weeks later, then they had Beatlemania. They take people from one extreme of sadness to another extreme of elation. But it's all, as if we invoke the idea of the devil, that's him shaking up our psyche. That's him psychologically and spiritually shaking people up from one extreme to the other to agitate, I'll say, this sort of elixir of life. It's like, in the terms of the symbology of, can I say it? Well, yeah, okay. So like in this sort of Masonic way of trying to create from base forms, like say in metal, when you're trying to, the alchemy of metal, it's the alchemy of human beings. That this is how you agitate human beings, by agitating their psychological and spiritual well-being from one extreme to another. And it's done through this web. Doesn't necessarily have to be of lies, of half-truths. You stitch a half-truth one way and a half-truth the other way, and then you make this grand tapestry. So, and again, a lot of tricks were done. I wish that when I was born, they would have just taught me a language and then said, now, you have to know that the people who shot JFK are still alive and it hasn't been solved, and they're trying to sweep it under the carpet. And everyone's acting like we can just keep going to work and act normal and everything's going to be all right. It isn't. So I wished that they would have told me the people who are in charge of our governments are the same people who assassinated the last guy. A coup d'etat was done. And everyone's just acting like everything's totally normal. Okay, so anyway, better stop with that line of talk, right? But you understand what I'm saying here, right? So again, like what happened to us in 2020, already people are acting like, yeah, well, everything's perfectly normal. It isn't. And this is one way of showing to some people like that it's perfectly normal. And of course to other people who, obviously there's going to be still a lot of people who have this constant companion now, and they're never going to want to come to these realizations. Vast majority, I don't think, are going to want to say, oh my God, you're telling me I have these small satellites constantly keeping my cells companion? And I know people might say, oh no, you're crazy, that's just the Russian version. It doesn't matter. The symbology is there. I'm speaking, of course, and I think you get this in general terms. It doesn't matter if our supposed political enemies are creating this narrative. That narrative is for anybody who chooses to believe in it. And I saw that Egypt had outlawed importing any of this that was manufactured in either the UK or Italy or the United States, I think, as well. And so they did say, oh, we do approve that one, though. from Russia. So Russia does export to certain countries. I think maybe Argentina was of a similar mind and that kind of thing. Now, from my point of view, I think you know, and maybe a lot of you do as well, like, I'm not putting anything inside me that's going to be my constant companion, right? And to me, that just seems eminently sensible. That seems like common sense. But common sense, of course, I did recognize it seemed to be missing before 2020. But 2020 confirmed that it is gone. But I'm scrolling up and down because look, you know, I can't really say it. There's other things there any more than that. There's other things there that perhaps I would have liked to have read out. But maybe I'll continue, elsewhere. Um, I say, can I read this? Emergency mass distribution of the scene began in December 2020 in countries including Russia, Argentina, Belarus, Hungary, Serbia, Pakistan in limited quantities, the Philippines. So again, and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, which is it's the most Western of the Arab countries, but it's not really a country. It's at least 5 city-states. But at the same time, that they take no messing around as far as Western, a little allowed messing around, but they don't mess around like we do in our Western countries. I did a video on that. It's on Odyssey and Rumble if you're interested. But anyway, just goes to show, like, it's good to have another perspective and to understand that not everything has to come from whatever remains of our Western perspective. Yeah, I don't think I can get into any details. There might be some things that are details that are interesting. I've read over a few of those things, but yeah, can't really do it more. I think really that's more or less what I wanted to cover. Just to sort of say, look, to me, it means a lot, and I hope that the meaning sinks in for you as well, of the realization that as above, so below, as outside, so inside, constant companion, fellow traveler. And I just want to see if there's anything I forgot to read out that I had. Yeah, the cedars of God and the tall pines. Do you know, I think it was the tall pines is the place where they launched from, something like that, which reminded me of Palo Alto in California, because that means tall trees or tall poles or tall pines as well. And it reminded me of the ringing cedars of God. Cedar is a type of pine tree, or that kind of conifer tree. So there's some connection there, because the ringing cedars of God is that famous book coming out of Russia, tying to nature and being one with the land and that kind of thing. Vladimir Meager is his name. And the Anastasian movement. And I'm going to have to look it up, I guess, but Anastasia is a flower. And I have a feeling it's the Russian equivalent of ISIS. I better just look it up. What does Anastasia mean? Originates from Greek and Russian cultures. Primary meaning is resurrection. Derived from the Greek word anastasis. Because stasis is going into a suspended animation, and ana means coming out then. The opposite of suspended animation, coming back up out of suspended animation. So rising again. And look, I hope you can see, I don't think any of you are disagreeing with me anyway, the phoenix rising from the flame in Arizona. Again, we have the same meaning in Anastasia, rising again, the phoenix from the flame. And the fact that is, I know I had to take a bit of a leap there that I didn't quite explain how we got to Palo Alto, but I think I remember looking at the tall trees or the cedars is something to do with the launch site of Soyuz and Vostok. And Anastasia then out of that movement. So again, it's the resurrection theme, traveling east, traveling west, and being reborn, and the sun and the moon, and the marriage of the sun and the moon. I have a feeling I'm forgetting some things, but that's more or less it. There's Yuri's name, if you can see it. So that's Yuri's name in Russian. So although I covered the Hebrew one, in Russian, Yuri's name, I think is that it? I better type it in again. No, maybe not. Maybe that's Soyuz. That must be Soyuz. Um, yeah, no, that's, beg your pardon, no. That's Yuri. That's how you spell Yuri there. You Yuri. Yuri. And the other one must have been Soyuz. Yeah, Soyuz. So that's how you spell it in Russian there. And Soyuz means union, but it can also mean alliance, a league, an association, conjunction, combination. So we're definitely, when we think of a coalition, syncretion, combination, conjunction, a union of two opposing forces, the East and the West, the two pillars of Joachim and Boaz. This is the secretion, the hardening of the concrete, and the alchemical mix coming together of the human population. Okay, I think of that's more or less, and there's he's cementing it and tying together in a knot. Right, the comment here is, I'll wrap up the stream now and just catch up here on some of the comments. Lily says, oh no, I read that one out already. I'm sorry I can't put these on screen. I'm using, I might as well say it, I'm using OBS. I shouldn't really get into the nuts and bolts of it. Anyway, I don't know of a way in this streaming software to put the quotes or to put the comments up on screen. Anyhow, just trying to see where I left off the last time. Oh, Lily says, you might live to 110. I might, but who knows? I'm not even sure if that would be something I'd want. But I know everyone in the Bible would sort of say 110. You're barely past the halfway mark there. That's the way they'd be thinking. Like people like Rachel and Isaac were the parents of Jacob and Esau, and Lost puts them on screen and goes from them to the space race. So that's why I really do think that Lost is not to be underestimated as just being a mere TV show. And it introduces all the philosophers, who I haven't read, like Heidegger and Kierkegaard and things like that, and John Locke. Well, I might have, read up their Wikipedia entries, but that's about it. I'm over halfway there, says Dr. Crispy. To everything there is a season. I did catch that already. Peter Santinello, says Lily Gazoo, posted a video, a couple of living. Sorry, start that over. Peter Santinello posted a video of a couple living 50 years on Molokai. Where's Molokai? Off grid. No TV. They missed nothing. Yeah. Well, I haven't seen really any TV in 10 years anyway. Or any movies really in 10 years. Perhaps one or two that came out in the last 10 years, but mostly not. 50 years ago, neighbours rambled here. No TV. There was a local rambling open house. Anyone could drop in. Yes, pubs were public houses, open houses. Good man, Crispy. Lily says, I was made for that rambling life. Dr. Crispy Rothschild says, in the pines where the sun never shines. Oh, what's that a line from? Slowboy says, Saint Anastasia is known as a healer and the deliverer of potions, an apothecary, and died December 25th, 304 AD. Okay. Anastasia, says Tom Twain, was purported to be the only survivor of the Romanov massacre. Oh yes, Anastasia was the daughter of, or was she the youngest or the most favoured daughter of Tsar Nicholas II? And that would make sense then. I mean, if the Romanov family could be restored to the throne, and I know there are some people who are saying that they are the rightful heirs or the Romanov family, maybe it could happen one day. I don't know. So that would make sense to be the rebirth of the Romanov ruling family, the Tsars, again. And then history could just continue repeating. But that would really, really irritate me if we just had to keep going over the same old stuff. Anyway, amazing. Anastasia was the purported only survivor of the Romanov massacre. I think they were leading us up the garden path. Where the well, what's the best flower? Where the Edelweiss might be growing? I don't know. Or Erica, the loveliest flower in the Vale. Interesting, says Lily. There's a huge amount of symbolism in flowers. And I always thought it was just stupid stuff. Dr. Crispy Rothschild says, always remember and never forget how it takes 6 men to carry a man to his grave, but only 1 woman to put him there. Yeah, always remember to never forget. And Tom Twain says resurrection. Well, yeah, so that's the theme there of the space flight, both in NASA and in the Soviet program, and in Anastasia, and in pretty much the whole of Masonic stuff and Kabbalist stuff. East meets West, the marriage of the sun and the moon. As one dies, so the other is reborn, and on again in the cosmic ballet. Sort of get a bit, what's his name? Carl Saganish. But anyway, that is pretty much it. I've been going for a while anyway, so I'll leave it at that. But maybe I'll play out with that piece of video that you might have not seen at the very beginning. So I'll just put it at the end. If I do sort of get time to make this stream sort of condensed, cut out some of the pauses or bits that aren't along a sort of a proper narrative. If I wanted, because I did do that with a couple of my streams there. I republished one on Odyssey, tightened it down a bit, and I put some of the videos that I wanted to include properly in it so that they come out properly. If I ever do that, I might add a couple more things to it and re-upload it to Odyssey. But I'll play it out anyway with this footage of the hero, Yuri Gagarin, meeting Khrushchev. And yeah, he really nearly wears the face off Khrushchev. It's kind of, I was like, geez, that's a bit weird. But anyway, it's funny and it's interesting and it's fascinating. And I'll leave it at that. And I'll say thanks very much for listening. Lily says the library is closing. So that's good enough reason if I didn't have one already to end it. So cheers and appreciate everybody listening. I had 10 or 11 there at one stage, 10 now apparently. So I'm glad to have you along for the company and anyone else who listens in the future. So I'll play it with this and I'll talk to you again hopefully another time before too long. Cheers.
Deified as the man of the century arrives at the airport outside of Moscow for his first public appearance. Questions that have arisen in the West about the validity of his flights have no place here today, as the crowds go wild over the first man to conquer space. Major Gagarin's initial function is a long, red-carpeted walk to the platform, where Khrushchev greets him. Gagarin puts party first by thanking the communists for the opportunity. Russian Yuri's pictures are when grumblings in Russia about the cost of the space program. But that is forgotten. And tens of thousands pouring into Red Square get a glimpse of their hands atop Lenin's tomb and receive their accolades. There have been many unanswered questions about who is number one man in Russia today.